All right. So everybody that's listening to us, whether it's you're listening to us live on the radio, whether you're listening to us live on one of the podcasting sites, whether it's Spotify, whether it's YouTube, whether it's God knows what else, we appreciate you listening. Again, podcasting people, like, subscribe, share this podcast. We're trying to get this out to as many people as possible. Radio people, we always appreciate you listening. Thanks so much. Wherever you're listening to us in the country, around the world, wherever it may be, thank you so much. Great guest today from my home state of Rhode Island. Phenomenal tennis player during high school. She was 68 and 0. I mean, that's almost incredible. It is incredible, I should say, in whatever sport you're playing, whether it's tennis, soccer, basketball, the list goes on and on. 68 and 0. This is Perri Sheinin, and she is the assistant coach of Brown University women's tennis, former Brown University tennis grad, and she's still over there kicking butt. As I just said, you can follow Perri at her Instagram at Perri. It's PerriSheinin, double INs there. It is Perfect Perri on TikTok. And she does have a podcast, which weekly she interviews women's tennis stars from around the country. It is On the Rise. That is the name of the podcast. Again, On the Rise. Definitely like, subscribe, and share her podcast there. So, Terry, I know that was a lot. Perri, rather, I know that was a lot to say. I'm fumbling and stumbling with words now. But thanks so much for coming on the program. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for such a lovely introduction.
Yeah, I know. I started talking too much and I did a little fumble and stumble, but we recovered pretty well. But let's talk about high school, growing up in Rhode Island, going to East Greenwich High School, going 68 and 0 with three state championships in tennis. That's pretty impressive. Talk about that high school career in general before we even get into Brown.
Thank you. Well, my high school career was a privilege and an honor to play alongside girls who became my family. So, my best friend in the world is still from my high school tennis team. And so,
Wow.
it was such a privilege to be able to connect with the students in that way and to see them as more than athletes. And obviously we spent time together in the classroom and then we'd go out to the courts, and it was my first experience playing on a team because tennis is so individual and very cutthroat in junior tennis, a lot of emotional trauma in that space. But then to go to high school tennis and have the opposite, I mean, everyone was so inclusive and kind, and it was a celebration of sport. It wasn't as much results focused like junior tennis was.
Yeah, and any sport is competitive in general, but like you said, those individualized sports can really get intense on that level, especially in that grade school level and even going into high school. So again, as we teased before the interview really got into gear, you did go 68 and 0, won three championships in general. Talk a little bit about that and how a team from again, East Greenwich does have a lot of talent coming out of that area, but it's, different from LaSalle and Hendricken and Bayview, where they recruit a lot of their people to come to their school. Whereas East Greenwich, it's pretty much you live in East Greenwich, you go there, and that's the way the cookie crumbles. So, how is it to play against, again, these big schools in girls' tennis, such as LaSalle, such as Bayview? The list goes on and on.
I was so excited to play for East Greenwich because it was my hometown, and I stayed right in East Greenwich to go to high school 5 minutes away from my house. And so it truly did feel like home. And I feel like I brought that energy of being at home on the tennis court. And so did my teammates because a lot of us were from East Greenwich as well. And so it was this community that, as I said before, felt like family. And I feel like that translated on the court, and it was very process oriented. Our head coach, Mark Riccata, was fantastic. He was also my English teacher and a huge mentor for me in life beyond the court. And so he led us to a space of unity, and we were able to bring that to matches.
So is that the reason why you did a major in English because Mark had such a big influence on you in college?
He was a huge reason why I majored in English, absolutely. And I will also go back to my third grade teacher, Carol Alfano, who inspired me to journal every day. And that was my first time experimenting with writing and with actually creative writing and nonfiction writing and all these different genres that, of course, in third grade I couldn't have even named, but I was
Right.
just exploring and figuring out how to express myself beyond the tennis court. And that really shaped the rest of my life.
Well, it's nice that you took again that third grade experience and also the high school experience to major in English in college, and that those teachers had that effect to go into college and do that. So again, you go to college at Brown. Talk about the recruiting process because again, most people in general, especially if you're a Rhode Islander like you and I are, it's such a small state. You know, basically everybody, especially in your town that you live in. You kind of want to get the hell out of there and kind of experience what else is going on in the country and most generally the world too. But you stood home and went to school at Brown, which is a prestigious Ivy League school, we must say. But what made you want to stay home at Brown and not go to another school? Because I'm sure with the accolades you had in high school, you are highly recruited to go to other schools around the country.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like to tell people that if the Brown campus had been anywhere in the world, I would have wanted to go there because as soon
Okay.
as I stepped foot on campus, it was magic. I mean, truly from the classroom to the tennis court to everything in between, I felt at home and I felt like I was going to be able to reach there and strive for goals that were greater than myself. And so it was not just the tennis court, but it was also the experiences that I had in the classroom, even on my recruiting trip, that shaped my decision heavily. I went to a class called The History of Jazz, and the professor gave this lecture that was like a performance. It was so moving. And then he played over beautiful speakers jazz music, and the students wrote about how they felt emotionally listening to the jazz music. And someone who is an English major, of course, like me, is immediately drawn towards that energy and towards the liberal arts education that Brown provided. But also, Brown has an open curriculum. So we don't have to take any classes when we get there. And I love that because I was never going to take math or science ever again. And I didn't. And it was great. And it was the combination of that, of course, and then the incredible level of tennis that I had the privilege of playing with and raising my game to meet my teammates. And when I didn't, then of course I felt that. But by my junior year, I felt that I was able to break in and really make more of a stand on the tennis court than I had my first 2 years.
I want to go into your career at Brown, but kind of detour off into this question because I do think it's important for people listening or watching this broadcast in general. So, Perri, let's talk about this as far as the education aspect of Brown University. Again, it's Ivy League. You went to East Greenwich, I went to LaSalle. When I came personally out of LaSalle, I was very much prepared. When I went into college, I got a 3.7 like it was nothing. People were complaining about, oh, this is so hard. I said, I learned this 2 years ago at LaSalle. Talk about coming out of East Greenwich into such a tough curriculum like Brown, as far as an Ivy League school where everybody says, oh, Ivy League, that's really intense. Were you prepared educationally from East Greenwich to go into Brown, or was it kind of shock and awe when you got there?
That's a wonderful question, and I'm really excited to talk about it. So thank you for asking about it because I was extremely prepared, like you. The East Greenwich High School curriculum was wonderful and it was really rigorous in high school. I struggled mightily and didn't sleep much between tennis and school, but it perfectly prepared me for Brown. And in fact, I like to tell people that I got more sleep in college than I did in high school because we had 6:30 a.m. practices, so I was going to bed early. And I did feel like I was able to handle the course load. Now, at Brown, you can kind of be the architect of your own education and take the classes
Mhm.
that speak to you. And so I did that. So it also did not feel like work. It felt like playing all the time because I was in the acting studio a lot. I was writing essays for my English classes and reading books that were stretching my imagination. So it felt like I was constantly exploring and being in this playful space that allowed me to grow.
So, just to tell everybody, if you're just joining our conversation right here, this is Perri Sheinin. She is the assistant coach at Brown University for women's tennis. She is a former Brown University tennis star. If you want to follow Perri, again, it's Perrisheinin on Instagram, Perfect Perri on TikTok. She does have a podcast we do hope you look into. It is On the Rise podcast on all your podcast platforms. Again, On the Rise podcast. She interviews tennis stars from all over the country, specifically in college. Let's go back into Brown University as far as your tennis career. I know you specifically said in your last answer that you kind of were okay freshman and sophomore year, but you kind of really took control junior year. Go a little bit more in depth on that, if you could, please.
Not being in the lineup my freshman year was one of the greatest things that could have ever happened to me because I started to find myself and my identity off the tennis court. And at Brown, I also met my closest friends who were actually random roommates of mine in my freshman year hall, and they saw me as a person, not just as an athlete. And so I was able to, for the first time, really separate myself from the tennis court and from, honestly, my lack of success and failures on the court my freshman year. Because as soon as I got home to my dorm, it was just greeted with open arms, and they didn't know about what happened on the court that day. And so they could see me as someone else and a whole person beyond my tennis results. And so I worked very hard my freshman and sophomore summers to break into the lineup, to find a way in, to do anything I could to just claw in there. And my junior year, I was able to play matches for them and be a contributing member of the team on the court. And that was a really special feeling until, of course, the pandemic ended it all. But it was really fun. It was just really fun to strive for something, as I said, greater than myself and to make it in there and to have that experience of finding myself beyond the tennis court and then also being in the lineup because I realized that I wanted it, but I no longer needed it. And that's when I got it my junior year.
So, when I was on the soccer team at my school, we all ate together, kind of hung around with each other. Again, you weren't hanging around with every single guy on the team, but you were with, majority of guys, you went out with them, whatever it may be. Is that how the tennis team was situated? Because it seems like, again, you had your friends on the team, maybe, but you had a lot more friends off the team, at least from the way you're bringing it to the viewers here. Maybe I'm misunderstanding here.
Felt like it was a great balance because every spring, as you know, with college sports, you're basically traveling with your team, you're basically living with them in your season. And so I had the privilege of spending so much time with them on the road. And I felt like I was able to have a balance to have my friends off the team and my friends on the team. And one of my closest friends was 1 year older than me on the Brown tennis team. And she was a huge mentor for me and was a big support and a huge reason why I felt like I was able to find confidence and find belief in myself, especially over those first 2 years when I didn't have the tennis results behind me.
I want to ask you this question because you graduated, but obviously COVID happened. Can you talk to the viewers and the listeners that are in the audience here a little bit about that experience? Because again, it's nothing that any of us ever faced before in our lives. But you specifically being in the height of college, the height of your social life in general, really went through this trying time. I want you to tell viewers and listeners that didn't experience it like that, how it happened.
I want to first put into context that what I went through is nothing compared to, of course, what a lot of the world was going through. It was a lot less traumatic, of course, for me, but still I was losing tennis and I felt like my identity was shifting and it was all happening so quickly because we literally got shut down in a week, of course, just like all the other colleges across the country.
Mhm.
And I thought I was going back, kept training, and I trained throughout my senior year as well. Now, unfortunately, the Ivy League canceled our junior and senior seasons, so
Wow.
that ended up being the end of my career. And it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. But I was also able to find solace in the fact that I founded my podcast in my childhood bedroom right here during that time. So as upset as I was, I also reached out to people and I had this amazing support group that kind of was my therapy on air and having these conversations about both losing tennis but finding ourselves beyond the court.
Now, could you have went back and played in 2023? We hear a lot of stories about those extra years of eligibility. We see this in basketball, in football specifically, due to COVID. Could you have done that? And how would that have affected? Would you have to pay still to go to Brown? Or, I don't know. I know there's no scholarships there. I know there's the academic scholarships, but how would have that played out?
I could have stayed at Brown because I actually was part of the student athlete advisory committee that petitioned the Ivy League to grant a fifth year of eligibility if the athletes wanted it. Now, when I graduated, I didn't really find a graduate program at Brown that I felt would suit me and suit my needs because I was going to be a journalist. And so we actually don't have a journalism undergrad. And I got to make my own major, which was so cool. And I'm so grateful for every moment of it. But if I had gone to grad school, I would have wanted to focus on that journalism piece or also potentially sports fashion, another big passion of mine. And so Brown did not have either of those avenues. And so I looked elsewhere. I did plan to take a fifth year, but then I got a broadcasting job. And so it was tough. I don't know if I quote unquote made the right choice, but I made a choice that felt authentic to me in that moment. And I don't have any regrets, but I certainly would have loved to experience a different part of the country and go and take that fifth year. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you never know unless you try it. But at the same time, it's the same with broadcasting. So I wouldn't have known what local news sports broadcasting was like unless I said yes. And then a week after graduation, I started my job.
Yeah, so let's kind of backpedal here on this, Perry, because maybe I'm missing some gaps with my questions. So I want to backpedal. So, how did your interest in sports broadcasting, sports media in general come about? Because we haven't really touched on that in this first part of the interview.
It was a very slow process. I honestly didn't even know really what sports broadcasting was and if it was a career for me because there weren't many women in it, especially when I was growing up. And so I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily see myself in that path, but I knew when I graduated from Brown, I wanted to combine sports and combine acting, that performance aspect of it. And I didn't really know if there was a path for that, but I continued to explore. So when I was at Brown, I did 10 internships in sports media, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And so I got to see if I wanted to be more on the behind the scenes administrative side or if I wanted to be in front of the camera. And I did an internship my junior year at WPRI at Channel 12 in Providence, and I covered Tom Brady's last season as a Patriot. So this was back in 2019, of course, before the pandemic. And the timing worked out, so I was able to put together a demo reel, which is what all broadcasters need to break into that space, is just basically sample clips of you mock on air. So I wasn't actually broadcasting those pieces as an intern, but my bosses allowed me to read some of their old scripts and then kind of find my own voice on air and then put together that sample reel and then send it off to news directors. So that's how I got my first job in sports broadcasting. But I didn't even know about what sports broadcasting was until my junior year. So it was a slow process.
I want to talk about the confidence issue there because, we were talking off here back and forth about, how I've got into a little bit of a live streaming, walking around Disney, doing other live streams in general. And I was telling you that it's very weird to hold up a tripod and you're kind of walking around Disney or walking around wherever it may be where you're live streaming and you're kind of talking to, obviously the people that are listening, but you're basically talking to yourself through a phone or a camera, whatever it may be. And you get those dirty looks by people, and it does feel a little strange. After a couple minutes for me, I, kind of, get my grind and kind of go forward. Did you have an issue with the nervousness in front of the camera? And also, how was your confidence level with that?
Because it felt like playing a match, it was the closest that I could find to feeling like I
Mm.
was competing. And so it felt like I was alive again. And so I actually loved the feeling of those nerves before going on air. And of course, every day before I go on air, I get nervous. But I also feel like the stakes are very different compared to when I was playing tennis, and the stakes felt so sky high. I put so much pressure on myself as a tennis player that this second career in broadcasting has almost felt like an opportunity to rewrite the script in a way. Because I feel like I did make a lot of mistakes as a tennis player, especially mentally, in preparation for matches. And so I thought, well, I mean, I might not be competing anymore on the tennis court, but maybe broadcasting is an opportunity for me to rewrite the game plan in terms of my mental preparation. So I do actually embrace those nerves, but of course they're there.
And then you went to, I believe, Pennsylvania after finishing off at Brown, took that job there, correct?
So often confused with Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It was actually Harrisonburg, Virginia. Very close,
Oh,
often confused. But yes, Harrisonburg, Virginia, which is the site of James Madison University. So that's the
okay.
college town that I was there covering.
So you were in the mountains, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's for sure. So how did that experience go? Because again, you've lived in your Rhode Island your whole life in East Greenwich, then going to Brown. Now you're going to a whole different place where you know no one. That's a huge, big deal because, you're in Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a small place. Virginia's a very large place. And then again, you're in a place where you basically don't know anybody.
It was shocking, to be totally
Mhm.
honest. It was shocking because I did not even mentally prepare for that part of it. I only prepared for the job, for the career that I was starting. But of course, there's so much more to it, including the fact that I knew no one, which I thought was really fun. I think it's cool because I didn't go far from home for college. And of course, I didn't know anyone at Brown before I actually started there. So it felt new, but it did not feel the same as driving across the country to literally start a new chapter and know no one geographically either. And so it was cool. I think it was an extreme grind and it definitely took a toll on my health mentally and physically because it was so much of carrying equipment and also the more sports I covered, the less I played. And so it was more of a sedentary job than one might think, even though I was kind of running around all the time. It wasn't the same, of course, as training and having those training blocks every single day as a
Mhm.
competitive tennis player. And so I really struggled with that lack of structure. And I got in workouts when I could, and I'm really proud of myself for that because it really helped my mental health and it helped me decompress before going into work every day. But I still feel that, gosh, it takes a toll on you day in and day out because I was a one woman show for 2 out of my 3 years there. And so I was in the sports department alone my second year and my third year. And so I shot, wrote, edited, produced all of my own content, which was an amazing opportunity. I wouldn't trade it for anything because I learned how to fail and I learned how to fail in front of a small audience. So that was great. I also hopefully learned how to tell a story, which is why I was there in the first place. So I hosted 3 shows a day,
Wow.
and every single day was extremely stressful because it was a quick turnaround and we had a new show from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And so I would go out between 6 and 10 and I would go find local sports games to cover. And of course, come back, turn around those highlights, edit those, write the script, go on air, do the website. And so it was an all-encompassing job. It was completely 24/7 and I completely threw myself into it. I had a wonderful mentor in TJ Eck, who was the sports director my first year there, and he
Mhm.
taught me basically everything that I needed to know, and then it was just up to me to put in the reps and, as you said, believe in myself and believe that the product was good enough to be on air, which I think it was 90% of the time.
Perry, how does the, work social life balance play in there? Because a lot of people don't really even know what you just said as far as, you're shooting, you're editing, you're doing all this stuff. You're a one woman band there. And this is not like it used to be. You used to have a producer, all this stuff. You used to have a couple people working for you. Now, again, it's a one woman band. So how did that affect your social life? Because again, you're, in your 20s, you want to go out, have fun, talk to people, have friends, and you're moving there from not, again, a place where you're moving to this place where you're not knowing anybody, and then you're throwing yourself into your job, which is commendable, of course. But then how does the social life aspect play in? I'm sure it suffers extremely.
I had no social life. I literally was at work. I was at the station until 2 or 3 a.m. every night
Wow.
because we hosted the late shows. And so by the time that I finished everything, it was very late at night and I just wanted to sleep and get ready for the next day because oftentimes there was a quick turnaround if we had a 9 a.m. press conference or something the next morning. And so I did not sleep much, kind of like in my high school years, but I certainly was not putting emphasis in my social life. And I loved the other reporters at my station, but we all had very different schedules. So it wasn't like we were meeting up all the time, but it really felt like a family in the station. And I'm so grateful for that.
It
And I
sounds
had no
like a
social
mental,
life.
sorry to interject. It sounds like a mental brain drain.
Yes, I had no social life, but I had a career life. And so I was willing to make that sacrifice, but it certainly started to feel lonely pretty quickly. And I had no social life until I met my boyfriend in my second year. And then it certainly felt less lonely.
So is this why you went into coaching and yeah, kind of done with media at the moment right now? I mean, you technically are still in media because you are doing the Tennis Channel podcast, but your main focus, I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is mostly on coaching, correct?
Right now, yes. So right now we just finished our season
Right.
in college tennis. And so I'm actually tonight broadcasting college tennis. So I still do play-by-play
Oh,
broadcasting on the side, but I told my agent that I would start in the summer months because, of course, it doesn't make sense when I'm traveling to also be able to be on the call. And so I'm balancing those two as best as I can. Now, broadcasting opportunities, as you know in the media world, can be few and far between, or they can be all at once. The freelance life is very up and down.
yeah.
And so I stepped away from local news last year. After 2.5 years in local news, I stepped away to focus on tennis broadcasting because I wanted to see how many opportunities I could gather in tennis broadcasting throughout a year. And I'm proud that I was able to get on air a few times last year in the tennis world and cover pro tournaments. But I also felt like I wanted to supplement that with something full time and I wanted to stay in the tennis world. But again, kind of like when I was at Brown, I didn't really have a name for it. There's no set path in media. So I kind of just make it up as I go along. And my head coach called me and offered me this job. I didn't even know it was open. And this head coach, Lucy Schmidhauser at Brown, is an incredible woman. And she's the coach who I played for when I was at Brown. And so it felt like such an honor. And I had to sleep on it for a moment. And then I said, of course. I mean, this would be such a cool opportunity to both get a new perspective on the game, but also to return home and experience Brown all over again in a way.
You're answering a lot of questions that I have as I look at some of the questions. So I appreciate that, hitting two answers at once. I want to talk about coaching at such a young age. Do you feel like it gives you an edge that you're, just out of Brown, a few years out, and you can kind of relate to what the girls go through on the team daily, not just in tennis, but also in school and social life. The list goes on and on. More so than somebody that's older or has been out of college longer than you have. They don't have that kind of edge like you do, I feel like.
I appreciate you saying that. It's certainly a balance, and I adored working with our coaching staff this year. Absolutely loved it. So I worked for my head coach, Lucy Schmidhauser, and then we also had a second assistant coach, Christelle Fox. Both Lucy and Christelle are national champions in D1.
Wow.
Christelle won a national doubles title with Northwestern. Lucy won a national team title with Texas. So there are these two women who are older than me, and then me on the coaching staff. So I think it was a cool balance because I learned so much from them, while also fortunately being able to provide a bit of a younger perspective and a recent graduate perspective as well. So I feel like it was important to have that balance because I certainly was learning the days in, days out of the job and relying on them in many ways. But fortunately, I felt like I was able to contribute in the younger perspective as well.
As a young coach, though, is it like you have to tread the line between being friends with some of the girls on the team and also being that mentor and that coach? And how do you play that line?
I'm not sure. I'm still learning.
Oh, geez.
That's
Okay.
a great question because that was the epitome of this season was learning how to
Huh.
be an authoritative figure while also feeling like a student athlete still. Because as I said, it kind of felt like not only a homecoming, but it felt like I was continuing my career as a Brown student athlete from where we left off when the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
So I had to mentally shift myself into a position of more authority, which felt strange because those girls totally could have been my teammates. But
Yeah.
it was a whole new year. So the girls who graduated last year were my freshmen when I was there. So this was a whole new group of girls, which also helped me mentally separate it because I was meeting a lot of them for the first time. And it felt really nice and very much like a privilege to be able to share with them advice, but more so just learn from them and learn from the ways that they're dealing with college athlete pressures. Because, gosh, I feel like I made a lot of mistakes as a college athlete, and it was cool to learn from the way that they dealt with it.
I would think a lot of these younger girls or any girls on the team come to you more so they would come to one of the older coaches, just because, again, you are not that far away in age from them and they can kind of talk to you about whatever it may be, whether it's a boyfriend problem, girlfriend problem, or some kind of social issue that they have a problem with. Whereas, someone older, they don't, they get it, they can empathize with them, but it's not the same as you kind of just stated in the last answer. I do want to tell people that are listening here, whether again they're listening or they're watching this. Perri Sheinin here on the program. She is the assistant coach of Brown University tennis, a former Brown University tennis star. And you can follow her. It's again Perri Perri on Instagram. It is Perfect Perri on TikTok, and then the podcast is On the Rise. And we do hope you check that out as well. As we round out the kind of toward the end of the interview with the last few-ish questions, let's talk about the season. It just ended, I believe, what was it, last weekend or this weekend, this past weekend? You guys went 10 and 12, 8 and 2 at home, which is a great record over in Providence. Tough record on the road. Talk a little bit about the season, what you saw, what you think can be better next year, even if you want to dabble into some of the recruiting process that is happening as we speak for next year, too.
Absolutely. We had an unbelievable amount of parity within our team this year. So if you were to look at our lineup from January to now, it's changed so much. We have players who started not even in the lineup who have played number one singles for us towards the end of the season. So it is a wild amount of parity, which was cool for me to see because we did not have that when I was playing for the team. And I feel that's pretty rare to have 9 out of 10 girls who I feel like consistently are being rotated in the lineup is pretty wild. Now, the way that my head coach Lucy does it is she gives everyone a chance to play themselves in or play themselves out of the lineup. And that's also very rare because if you look across the country, oftentimes coaches early on in the season, for many reasons that make sense, make a decision about a player and that's kind of where they are. But we give our players a chance every week to play themselves in or play themselves out of the lineup. And depending on the context, we were able to mix up a lot of different doubles teams, or of course, we feel like we could have done even more mixing up. But in general, we have a really nice team culture. And so the biggest things that I took from the season, definitely the first is the importance of team culture. That's something that Lucy came to Brown when I came to Brown. So that was back in my freshman year, back in 2017. And to see the amazing culture shift that she has created on this program is very inspiring. And our incoming recruits were so excited about the freshmen. I've met all three of them, the incoming freshmen for this fall. And they're players who are such gritty competitors on court, but very kind off the court. And I think that makes a huge difference in a program. And the other thing that I learned, among many others, but it was the importance of going 1-0 every weekend. And it's a football term that I would learn in Harrisonburg covering football, was the team would always talk about going 1-0 each week. But in all seriousness, having the ability to quickly recover from a bad loss or quickly get over and humble yourself after a good win is so important in the season. And I felt that as a player, but I see that even more as a coach in the way that we talk to our players after a win or a loss really shapes the energy that we bring into the next match.
So obviously the NIL is now in college athletics. I think it's really out of control. But that's another story for another day. And then we obviously have the transfer portal, which I believe is out of control as well. The rules are so out of control, in my opinion. Let's talk about that with women's tennis, but specifically with Brown. Can you talk about, is there any kind of effect that the NIL and the transfer portal have with you guys? Or is that more so like, we hear about that with basketball, baseball, and football mostly. I'm sure it does happen in the other sports, but it doesn't happen as much in tennis, or does it? What do you think?
With our program specifically, it's pretty rare. Both
Yeah.
NIL and transferring are pretty rare within Brown women's tennis. Now, our team culture changes every year. So we could have some new players next year who are interested in the NIL space. And fortunately, I do have connections with a lot of sports brands because, as I said before, I love sports fashion. So I've done my own reaching out and I've done partnerships with Under Armour and similar brands because I absolutely love sports fashion. And it's something that I'm super interested in pursuing, and I was super interested in studying it. I actually did an independent study about fashion trends on the WTA tour when I was at Brown. So it's something that I really love exploring. And if any of the team wants to, then I've told them that I would love to be a resource for that. But at the same time, most of them are focused on classes and studies and tennis and social life, and that kind of takes up their whole time.
I want to finish off with the last few questions as audience questions. Let's talk about women in media. Obviously, there's a lot of sexism going on, a lot about looks. You're in media. I'm sure you've either heard about this or maybe you've even faced this one on one. And there's some women that have some serious issues with this, and men are doing this to them. And there's some women that I know personally that have taken advantage of having good looks to move up the ladder. What else is that the biggest obstacle, I guess I should ask, for women in media, that it's basically all about looks? I was talking to a friend that worked at Fox News, and she tells me that she was in the makeup chair for over an hour every day she was on air, where some guy came in the chair and he just basically, they might have put a little blush or something on him. I'm not too good with makeup, so I don't know the terminology. So I'm a little ignorant on this topic, but that's what she was telling me. And the guy would just go on air, whereas the woman had to have her hair done, the makeup done, and everything else. So not to get long-winded on the question, but is that the biggest obstacle? Is it sexism? Is it looks? What is it?
I believe that talent rises to the top, and I believe that hard work rises to the top. And regardless of what you look like, I have seen many women thrive in this industry because they are just better than anyone else and they work harder than anyone else. And that has inspired me more than anything else. And I'm also very lucky to have rediscovered my athletic identity over the past 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. And that has allowed me to feel comfortable going on air without makeup because I used to be covered in so much makeup in local news. And that is part of tradition. That's part of the way that women present themselves and part of how they gain confidence for some of them as well. For me, it became a double-edged sword where I didn't feel comfortable going out without makeup.
Good for you.
So it was a nice change for me. And I'm very lucky because my boyfriend says that he would prefer me without makeup, and that helps because I honestly just need people telling me that. And it might be just because of society and the way that women are often portrayed with makeup, but I felt like the perfect image was like covered in makeup, the way that I looked almost quote unquote invincible on air. But I realized that the way that I look naturally and present myself naturally has actually become a strength for me. And so I'm still working on it, but I feel that all women deal with it differently. And for some, as I said, it gives them confidence, and that is fantastic. For others, I think, like me, it actually took away my confidence. So I'm working to find a balance in between those two things.
Your boyfriend is 100%. Most men will say this on the if everyone like women that are natural. I personally believe that. I know your boyfriend believes that, of course, and I know a lot of other men that I'm friends with or know personally agree with that too. We're all for the natural look, and if you're natural, it's great. I do want to move on again. We're winding down. I appreciate you being very gracious with the time today. Um, and we're rounding these audience questions out. Talk about this issue because, again, this is the big issue. It's the political issue. It's the issue that's on hand with some of the women we've interviewed about this that have had issues with this. The trans woman playing a woman's sports. I think that's how you say it. I'm not very good with all the terminology, but regardless of that, I think people listening and watching this know what it's about because we've done many interviews with women athletes about this. What is your position on this issue?
I don't believe that we have the right to talk about someone else's body and someone else's choices in the way that this country has chosen to. I believe that everyone, of course, should have free speech and share their opinion, but I think it has become something where people are trying to control other people's choices. And I feel that if you're a kind person and you're a hardworking person, I don't feel that most people are willing to go through a major surgery for an athletic advantage. I have not
Mhm,
seen that in covering sports. Now, that being said, I am also not educated enough in this topic to speak fluently about it. But
mhm.
from what I've seen and what I've heard, I do feel that it's a huge risk to be taking to go into a major surgery and then to come out and recover and then pick up your sport. A sport seems like it's a side part of this. These are how people find their identity and become themselves. And for some people, they're life-saving procedures. So for me, watching it, it's not even about sports.
Yeah, well, thank you for answering that honest, and I appreciate that. And people will agree with that. People will disagree. We'll leave that for the audience to decide. I do want to move on because I know you're going to get ready to do this broadcasting opportunity. I'm grateful that you gave us some time today. So let's end with this. Just speaking about your podcast on the rise. Give the audience a little synopsis of the podcast if they listen to it, what they can look forward to hearing, just a little taste.
On the Rise is a live community of female athletes who are moving on from competitive sports. And so for me, I focus on the college tennis space because that's where I come from, that's home for me. But we do talk about a lot of issues that are bigger than college tennis. So we talk about body image, we talk about self-confidence, we talk about that identity shift from being a college athlete to being a normal person in the real world, which is very strange because it's
Oh,
something
it
I'm
is.
still navigating. Oh, yes. And I feel like, especially for women, it's an odd balance between, hey, I was an elite level athlete, and also now I'm in this space where I'm not seen as an athlete anymore. And so for me, when I wasn't seen as an athlete, I wasn't even sure how to introduce myself. I was saying, "Hi, I'm Perry. I'm not sure who I am," right? And so we talked about that a lot in each episode, and we just released our 50th episode. And so I talked to current players, I talked to former players, and I talked to some upcoming players as well, some recruits, as they get ready for that jump from high school to college. And it's so interesting to see the perspective shift from being an incoming freshman to then being a senior when I talk to them again, and to
Mhm.
see the enormous growth that they've had. And then, of course, in my mind, the big difficulties that lay ahead of then finding yourself beyond college tennis.
Yeah, and I agree. And I do thank you for coming on again, Perri Sheinin, the assistant coach of Brown University women's tennis. She is a former Brown University tennis star. You can follow Perri. It's PerriSheinin on Instagram. Also, Perfect Perri on TikTok. Again, the podcast she was just speaking about is called On the Rise. Definitely go to all your podcast providers and watch it there, subscribe it there, listen to it there, whatever it may be. Perri, I hope we can have you on again. I had a lot of other questions I wanted to ask, but I wanted to be gracious with your time and not blow it up because I know you have a lot planned for tonight with the broadcast. And I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for reaching out, Rob. It was so lovely to meet you and make another Rhode Island connection. So thank you so much.